to Legislative Report with Representative Doyle Heffley. I'm Nick Ruffner. It's been a very busy legislative session with the House and Senate addressing many key priorities for Pennsylvania citizens. Among the major issues, transportation funding and job creation measures. Over the next half hour, we'll hear from Representative Heffley on the issues that he's concerned about. Welcome, Representative Heffley.
Thank you.
Let's start talking with transportation reform. The House and Senate had a major vote in November. I know that you voted against the plan that was proposed in the House and the Senate. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your vote and why you voted the way that you did.
Well, obviously, I think everybody is in agreement that we need to do something with our infrastructure, our roads and bridges. A lot of them were posted. We do have a deteriorating highway system. However, I didn't feel at the time of this vote that the fees and charges that were in that bill were warranted at this time. I would like to have seen more alternatives, looking at other options to find that extra revenue for our infrastructure needs. Also, I think it's important that whenever we consider these things, you look at it as a whole and really look at what some of the cost drivers are, and you know, looking at some of the regulatory and permitting processes and how do we streamline those processes. And I think some of that was addressed in this proposal, and I did support those issues. However, I could not support. I didn't think it was right for Carbon County and the people that I represent here in Harrisburg to vote in favor of any kind of fee or tax increase at this time.
There's been a lot of talk in Harrisburg and across the state about House Bill 1576. It's known as the Endangered Species Coordination Act. It was proposed by Representative Jeff Pyle. You've been a big supporter. Attended a hearing earlier in the year, in the summer, on this. Tell me a little bit about the bill and why you support it.
Well, I think there's a couple misconceptions with the bill. One of the misconceptions, a lot of folks have received some emails or some calls. There's a lot of misinformation, and people that said, "Oh, we're going to take the bald eagle off the endangered species list," and that's not anything about what this bill is about. I love the outdoors. Carbon County is a rural area. A lot of my constituents like to go out and hunt and fish, as I do, and spend time in the outdoors. We have the Lehigh River, and a lot of our waterways have been cleaned up over time, as we had seen the problems with our waterways from the mining industry and some of the manufacturing. So I'm very cognizant of the issues regarding the environment. However, I do feel that when we have commissions like the Game Commission, the Fish and Boat Commission, that there needs to be some oversight over these commissions and how they go about putting these species on the list. One of the things that I think, if you're looking at endangered species, say if they're endangered in the state of Pennsylvania, well, are they endangered here because of the climate isn't suitable for that species? And while we want to protect all of them, we also need to make sure that there's a little bit of a layer of oversight. These boards members of these boards have 8-year terms, and they raise their own revenue. So we don't, legislatively, I think it's important that we're reviewing the processes that they have in place, and that's what this bill would do, is it would review the processes that they use, the scientific processes based on science, and make those determinations, make sure they're reviewed, and that there's somebody watching over just to make sure the processes are followed correctly.
You talked about misconceptions. One of the misconceptions about the bill is that scientists are being taken out of the process. Is it correct that the decisions will still be made by the Fish and Boat Commission and the Game Commission? They'll just have to go through that extra layer of oversight.
Yeah, and nobody's talking about taking science out of this process at all. That's definitely something that was brought up, and it's definitely not true. Scientists will still be involved in this process. The Fish and Boat and the Game Commission will make these determinations. I think where the difference is, and what's really heavily impacted in Carbon County, is when they rate the rating of the streams, the Class A trout streams. We have so many organizations in Carbon County, our local sportsmen's clubs that maybe run nurseries and are stocking these streams and have kind of adopted these waterways to make sure that they're cleaned up and making sure that there's fish in there. And now, because they've adopted them, they come in and they'll rate these streams, and I don't always feel like they consider all the factors. And then when those streams are rated, then that also takes them off the list sometimes for stocking opportunities. So you take some of the best fishing opportunities in Carbon County, and we're kind of taking that away as these streams are getting rated. So I think there needs to be that consideration and that review process to make sure it's done properly.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about, we move from fishing to hunting, and we're going to talk about Senate Bill 648. Now, this was a bill that was passed by the Senate, came to the House passed it, and was signed into law by Governor Tom Corbett. You had an identical bill along with Representative Neil Goodman in the House, and that's just the way things work sometimes. The Senate passes a bill, sends it back, or vice versa. Tell me a little bit about that bill. It was protections for landowners when they allow people to hunt on their land.
Yeah, I had gotten several calls from local farmers who were concerned that opening up their private land to hunters, if that hunter or somebody is on that property, if something happens, they want to make sure that they're protected from liability. Now, if the farmer knowingly allows something illegal to happen on their property, obviously they're going to be held liable or have to go through the legal process. But to open it to, we want more farmers to open up their land. We want more of these private lands open for hunting opportunities. Majority of the hunting that takes place in the state of Pennsylvania happens on private lands. And we just want to make sure that if a farmer is going to be gracious enough to allow people to come on his property and hunt, he or she allow them to come on their property to hunt, that they're going to not then come back and be liable for something that those folks do.
And you and I have talked in the past about the amount of deer hunters and hunters overall in Pennsylvania among the nation's leaders and hunters even now. And so this is something that could even lead to a larger increase in hunting in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think it's something that we definitely want to continue to encourage our heritage when it comes to hunting, whether it be deer hunting, small game hunting, and now black bear hunting is taken off again. A lot of opportunities to hunt black bear throughout the state, but also with the fishing opportunities. And I think one of the things that when I look at legislatively or I like to look for common sense solutions, and this really, this legislation that it was a bipartisan legislation, and I'm glad to see it got passed because to me, it's common sense for those farmers to have that protection.
Now, you've just introduced a bill that would regulate discharges from fish hatcheries.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, one of the issues, and it goes back to the ratings of streams, we are really in the state cutting back and closing a lot of our fish hatcheries and nurseries down. And we used to stock over 5 million fish a year, the Fish and Boat Commission. Now they're stocking about 3.2 million. When we look at those opportunities, people want to be able to take their kids out to the lake and catch some fish. And when we're not stocking, it's not going to be able to keep up, I feel, with the amount of people that are fishing. Now, the Lehigh River Stocking Association, the Pohopoco Rod and Gun Club, and some other, and Nesquehoning Conservation Club are really doing a lot of work to make sure there's those fishing opportunities there. And what they'd like to see is more co-ops. Now, those co-op nurseries are run in conjunction with the Fish and Boat Commission. And it's funny because the Fish and Boat Commission actually had to make upgrades and shut down some of their nurseries because of some of these regulations. And basically, in going back to the science in the matter and talking with some of the folks at Fish and Boat Commission, it was proven that downstream from a nursery there are more fish in those waterways, but less macroinvertebrates or less bugs. I think that if you're looking at what the opportunities are to promote fishing experiences for young people, and we need to continue with our stocking and making sure there's going to be fish there for them to catch. And we're not going to be able to do that stocking in a cost-effective manner if we can't operate these nurseries.
And we have many more issues to get to on this edition of Legislative Report. We'll return in a moment.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual, and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Representative Doyle Heffley is here discussing current issues, including transportation and job creation. And Representative Heffley, you authored a bill earlier in the year, House Bill 1677. It has to do with property taxes. That is perhaps the major issue in Carbon County and across the state right now. Tell me a little bit about House Bill 1677 and some of the reforms that went along with that.
Okay. Well, I think as a whole, there's a whole package of bills and ideas right out there right now to change the way that we fund our schools at the local level. Right now in Carbon County and throughout the northeastern PA, one of probably the premier issue, the biggest issue, is property taxes. Currently across the state, through the local taxes, our school districts collect about $14 billion to fund public education. The state puts in about $10.5 billion. There's some federal dollars for approximately $26 to $27 billion per year that we spend on public education. Throughout Carbon County, we're looking at issues of property taxes continuing to go up every year. 1677, what that'll do is in combination with the package of bills, what 1677 will do is it'll make sure that any legislation that's passed to reduce property taxes will be in line with the definitions in the Constitution. And one of those bill proposals that we looked at is House Bill 76, which I am a co-sponsor of. It was a property tax elimination bill. And for the first time this session, we were actually able to run that as an amendment onto House Bill 1189. And through that process, we were able to finally get that up for a vote and see where we're at so we can move forward with the concept of property tax elimination. And that proposal would be an increase in sales tax, increase in earned income tax and PIT and some other taxes to supplement that $14 billion that we collect at the local level. 1677 was passed by the House. The amendment to 1189 failed. I did support 1189, which was a local option property tax, which would allow your local school districts to shift from property taxes to, say, an earned income tax or a business tax. But with that, I think one of the things that, and why I supported the bill, was to continue to push the conversation so that we can get some property tax relief. And I think one of the things, the misconceptions that I've heard back from people that are asking me about why I supported that proposal, I supported both. I'll support any bill that's going to reduce property taxes throughout Carbon County. But in that bill, school districts would still be subject to, they could not raise taxes above the rate of inflation. So this would not be a way for school districts at the local level to increase spending. It would simply be a tax shift at the local level, keeping those local dollars, dollar for dollar, going into the local schools. So it was a combination, a package of bills that we passed. They're now currently being sent to the Senate. I know our State Senator Dave Argel and Senator John Udicek in a bipartisan manner are working in the Senate as well. They've held hearings throughout Carbon County as the House had regarding this issue, and I think it is a bipartisan push to get that property tax elimination. But I'm going to continue to vote for any and all options to reduce that local burden of property taxes on the residents that I represent.
And while that work continues, there's been so much attention paid to House Bill 76, but even the bill's strongest supporters admitted that it still needs some work.
Well, I think anything that we do is going to continue to have to evolve. I mean, it's a very large state. The funding formula, how we fund our schools, a lot of people take issue with that. Some of the schools in Carbon County benefit from the current formula, some of them don't. How do we make that more equitable? And then also, I think underlying the whole issue, we need to continue to look at mandate relief. There are some proposals right now that I support in the House for mandate relief on our local schools so they can try to cut back on what some of those cost drivers are. And I think that's the key, is we need an education system that we need the best education system that we can afford in the state of Pennsylvania. And we can't continue to tax people out of their homes in order to pay for that. So as a legislator here in the State House, I think it's probably my top agenda item is to continue to push for some relief to our homeowners.
And that's the big takeaway, is that the work continues. You understand that this is a huge issue for people all over the place, including your district, so you'll continue to work to find a suitable solution.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be a bipartisan solution. It's really going to be dependent on the different regions in the state, how property taxes affect folks that live maybe in Philadelphia or some of the urban areas, and how they affect people that live in rural areas is a little bit different. So we need to find that common ground so we can get that relief out to all the residents across the state.
You talk about property taxes, and that is a huge issue across the entire state. A growing issue, unfortunately, is also drug abuse across our state, whether it be prescription drugs or the heroin epidemic that we've seen all over the place, including in Carbon County. Now, House Bill 1694, that deals with prescription drugs. And talk to me a little bit about what that does.
Yeah, what it would do is it will set up a prescription drug database, and it'll be looking at different scheduled narcotics, and these are the drugs that are going to be included in this database are what we would be considered to be addictive, dangerous narcotics. For the most part, the different schedules, some of them are less considered to be a little bit less addictive than others, but what we're finding is that as you can't get maybe the Oxycontins and the Percocets, which have a big high price street value, people have shifted to getting these drugs that are maybe scheduled a little bit lower on that list and being able to extract the different opiates out of those drugs. So what this database will do is it'll provide that doctors and pharmacists at the point of prescribing these medications will be able to look in this database and see if a patient had maybe been doctor shopping. And I think it's unfortunate. A lot of times people go in for, they have an injury or they have, something where they're prescribed these narcotics and become somewhat addicted to them before they really realize what's happening. The opium addiction is a physical addiction. It's a very powerful addiction. And we're seeing it more and more among our young folks because they're getting these prescription drugs out of the medicine cabinets in their homes. We've done a drug and alcohol awareness expo last year. We've also and in that process, we had one of the local police departments there to take a prescription drug take back, and they was also run periodically throughout Carbon County. But Carbon County is 5th in the state right now as far as counties go for overdose deaths, and I think we need to address this at every level. If we can stop these prescription drugs from the point of sale hitting our streets, whether it be doctors that are over-prescribing or patients that are doctor shopping. But I go into my pharmacist to pick up my heartburn medicine, and my pharmacists are explaining to me that something needs to be done because they have a lot of the same people coming in and purchasing these narcotics and then selling them on the streets, and they're purchasing cash, and there's really no way of monitoring it without some type of database where they'll be able to look at that information. The only people who are going to have that access to that database are going to be your doctors and your pharmacists, and they already know, they're already writing the prescriptions. So they're not giving access to anybody that already isn't involved directly in that medical treatment. The Attorney General's office would have access if they have a warrant to have access under a police investigation. If they get a warrant to then get access to that database. So I know there's some people concerned about databases, but what we're looking at here is an epidemic across the state. More and more young people and middle-aged folks are becoming addicted. Carbon County is 5th in the state right now for overdose deaths, whether it be prescription drugs or heroin. And I think it's something that we really need to address and take a good hard look at. What do we need to do to stop the flow of these prescription drugs on our streets? one of my comments on the House floor, I said, you know, we ensure that every child when they're riding a bicycle is wearing a helmet. We don't, and it's a good thing. We don't have kids dying of bicycle accidents. We have people dying of overdoses from these either prescription drugs or the heroin the prescription drugs are a gateway into heroin. And we need to look at every effort that we can to stem that and kind of roll that back. We owe that to the next generation. We owe that to Pennsylvanians across the state.
I was told once by a coroner that drugs don't discriminate. They don't, you know, affect the rich or the poor or the old or the young. They affect everybody.
Yeah. And you know, along with that, I think there's a lot of other proposals. Serving on the House Human Service Committee has really opened my eyes up to what some of the different types of treatment that are out there, some of the new experimental treatment for addiction. And you know, you look at somebody who has an addiction issue, and the number one thing you want to do is get them in to some kind of treatment to try to get them rehabilitated. You know, our prisons are overcrowded. Majority of the folks that are in our prison system is somehow related to drugs, whether they be you know, petty theft because they're an addict and they need drug money, or whether it be an accident. The amount of people that are getting DUIs for other than alcohol has increased by about 140% across the state. So we can definitely see that there is a trend that we need to address that.
Well, one of the big questions I know that you get when you're in your district is, what is the legislature doing to create jobs across Pennsylvania, and especially in Carbon County? Let's talk a little bit about some of the things the legislature has been working on to create more jobs.
Well, we've had several policy hearings, and one of them goes back to looking at a regulatory process, House Bill 1576, which would help with some of those regulatory processes. So the developers are going to know coming in if they're going to do a business expansion, what the rules are right out front, making sure that they know that the property that they're going to develop, what environmental hurdles or what are they going to have in place to make sure they protect the environment, because each parcel of land may have a different type of species or different characteristics that would make them subject to that. So I think that's one thing. Also, you know, last session we looked at the corporate net income tax and also the Delaware loophole, which we've heard so much about. Is you know, close the Delaware loophole. Well, we voted to close the Delaware loophole and at the same time reform our corporate net income tax. We have some of the highest corporate taxes in the world, and we need to make Pennsylvania a more attractive place to do business. We've had a lot of opportunities throughout Carbon County. One of them was with the Blue Mountain Ski Area expansion, creating a water park, which will create quite a few jobs in Carbon County. Working with Kovach, I authored some legislation to help out one of our local manufacturers, House Bill 1357, which is right now you know, on the docket to be third consideration here in the House. And basically what that law would do was it would strengthen the laws for impersonating an officer, and at the same time it would allow for our local manufacturers to transport their vehicles, their emergency vehicles, to and from displays and expos and for sale. Right now, if you are building a emergency vehicle, you can't transport it on the road unless you're a police officer. So this would kind of strengthen that law, and at the same time allow for those people that are working on whether mechanically or building those vehicles some right to at least transport their vehicles without having to trailer them, which can be very costly. So I think it's a lot of little common sense ideas to make Pennsylvania a little bit better business friendly. At the end of the day, the majority of our jobs are coming from small businesses. So, and that's what we have a lot of in Carbon County, are small businesses. How do we continue to promote that, whether it be through regulatory reform and the permitting process, tax incentives, as I serve on the board of the Ben Franklin Technology Board, which is an incubator for technology jobs across the state. And they have a facility in the Lehigh Valley, which also works with some of our local manufacturers in Carbon County to bring in new technologies. And I think that's one of the keys as we become a more economic, as we look at economic growth. We're not just competing in Pennsylvania or New Jersey, we're competing across the world. So, you know, providing funding that's there for these startup companies and these tech industries that are cutting edge, technologies, and then taking those technologies that these companies, these small startup companies that are world leaders, and bringing them right into our manufacturing base locally can provide us somewhat of an edge when competing in those global markets.
We just have a few minutes left. One more question for you. Let's talk a little bit about your outreach services. You outreach to veterans, to your constituents in general, a lot of that across Carbon County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the great things, people ask me all the time, what are the best things that you get done in Harrisburg, or what's the most rewarding part of your job? And I think it's, if somebody comes into our office and they're having an issue with a state-related government agency, whether it be PennDOT or DPW, and we can work them through the process and expedite the process and make it a little bit simpler for them, cut some of the red tape and the bureaucracies. That's what my district office staff does. If somebody needs a rent rebate filled out or is having an issue, need those things expedited, we can generally do that. As you look at government as a whole, we have a lot of bureaucracies, and they're not always responsive. So when somebody has an issue with those bureaucracies and they come to my office, we are responsive. We are accountable, and we're going to make sure we cut through the red tape and get that done. We also do a lot of outreach. We do our Senior Expo, which I think this year we had about 1,100 folks come through our Senior Expo. A lot of information gets out to the public. We do that in conjunction with Senators Dave Argall and John Udicek. We did a Drug and Alcohol Awareness Expo. We brought in three speakers from across the state to talk about the opportunities of the drug courts and what some of the newer treatments are for addiction, and then also identifying those addictions and how parents can identify if they think their child may be having a problem. We had a mock bedroom as to what to look for, and that was set up by one of our local providers for drug and alcohol services. So, and we also do our Veterans Outreach Expo. I think it's key that we continue to honor our veterans. They served the country to protect our freedoms, and we can never forget that. So, it's always an honor for me to be invited to either be at the Memorial Day services or at the Veterans Day services, but every year we also like to do something to honor those veterans through our office.
And if it's something that is outside the scope of the state, you can provide people resources to get in contact with their federal congressman.
Yeah, we do outreach services at our offices with Senator Pat Toomey's office, also Congressman Lou Barletta's office, at our Albrightsville office. They set up hours once a month to come in. We also do outreach for veterans. We have the Legion's service organization that comes in and provides benefit services. We also work very closely with our county veterans office and veterans coordinator, and definitely do what we can for our veterans organizations. We also do outreach into our fire companies that talking about small gains of chance. We had finally got some real good legislation passed to give them that relief. So those are a lot of the services that we can provide.
Well, it's been great catching up with you, Representative Heffley. I look forward to the next legislative report, and I want to let our constituents know if you have questions on any legislative topic, we'll show you how to get in touch with Representative Heffley in a few seconds. I'm Nick Ruffner. Thanks for tuning in to Legislative Report with Representative Doyle Heffley.